I live in the center of the city now, but a few years back I lived in an old house on a somewhat sketchy street. But that doesn't mean I was poor. The house was ugly from outside, and it was built before World War II, but clean, warm, and cozy inside, although many people died in it there. I always believed in ghosts because of all the weird incidents that happened. Like one time, at night, me and my mom were sitting in a room. It was pitch black outside the room we sat in. Suddenly, we heard someone was tripping over, falling in the kitchen. We also heard things like plates fall down and shatter. But when we walked outside, nothing was there. Everything was in its place, and we were so scared about what was going on. A few years later, I had a dream. Me and my mom were walking down a path, and suddenly we stopped, and I heard a voice saying, "Bridge." I felt something knocking on my back 3 times, and I woke up scared. Nothing was there, so I didn't think of it that much and went back to sleep. However, after that night, this dream appeared again and again. The voice said various things that I don't remember, and one time it said something about my mom's death. It always ended with something knocking on my back 3 times. It was creepy. One time, me and my mom sat in a room and talked about ghosts, and I told her about what I'd been dreaming. Mom went silent for a second, and she confided in me that once she was sitting with a friend, and he said something not too nice to her, just for fun. She got angry and screamed, "Shut up," in a male voice, and she didn't remember that. When she described the voice, it reminded me that the voice sounded just like the voice in my dreams. In 2017, she passed away because of cancer. She died in the same room, in the same house where I got those nightmares. After that, I moved out to another place a few years ago. So I don't live in that house anymore. But I still believe in ghosts, that they exist, and they are real.
When I was a kid, I was really into paranormal things such as ghosts and spirits, so I always got really excited for Halloween. On one Halloween, my parents took me and my brother to a ghost tour in the city. During the tour, we would visit real haunted houses, which were said to have some really violent ghosts. I couldn't be more excited. We arrived at the location for the tour meetup, an empty parking lot, but we were a bit early and nobody else had arrived yet. It was a chilly October night, so my parents decided that we should find a building to wait in until more people arrive. We walked over to the building that the parking lot was meant for, an old hotel, and entered the vestibule. We tried to fully enter the building, but we found that the doors leading to the lobby inside were locked. After a few minutes of standing around, I started to feel strange. A nauseous feeling had swept my stomach. Goosebumps ran up and down my arms, and a piercing feeling of being watched was almost burning my back. Looking around, it was obvious that me and my family were the only ones inside the vestibule. The lobby of the building was also devoid of people. Once we saw people enter the parking lot, we left, and I felt better. And after that, I was shocked to see the first place we stopped on the tour was the building my family had been waiting in. Now, this building we won't enter, because the spirit inside here is more violent than the others will encounter, the guide stated. In here, we have the Shadow Man. He doesn't terrorize the whole building, just the area that you enter through. He's been known to slap and scratch people coming inside. A few pictures were passed around. All of a sudden, I don't know, but I recognized that an inky black figure stood against the door's windows. Its eyes were glowing white, and it had long fingers and pointed nails. It was freaky to think that I might have been targeted by the Shadow Man, but I didn't think much of it until after the tour when my family went back home. I started to complain to my mom that my back was itching and burning, so she grabbed some ointment and told me she would look at it. We thought it was just a bug bite. We had been walking around outside at night after all. When she lifted my shirt, she asked when I had scratched my back. I told her I hadn't. She took a picture on her phone and showed it to me. I was met with a long red scratch leading from my shoulder to the middle of my back. The skin on my back was a shade of red, like a rash. Me and all of my family couldn't say anything, but just turned back straight to our house. The shadow man had got me.
One day, when I was in the 6th grade, on a rainy day, I was walking home. On my walk, which is about a mile or so long, I had to walk through a cemetery. Not a stereotypical, shabby, haunted one, but one that had many people walking through and was usually full of maintenance employees. I remember walking by a group of them sitting on benches on a break. I thought nothing of it, as he stood up and started walking at a fair distance. After a bit, I looked back at him and he looked down quickly. He was in the same baby blue uniform as the others and had a gray beard, but I made out a name tag, Frank P. As the other workers faded from sight, he was still behind me. I began to worry. A moment later, he called out, "It's wet, huh?" in a friendly voice. I chuckled politely and agreed. My worries increased a second later when I walked out and he was still behind me. I was close to my house now and it started to pour. My house in sight, I started jogging to get there. I glanced back and I saw the man, visibly angry, start running. As my house got closer, I began to sprint. I didn't look back as I slung the key out of my backpack and opened the door. I looked behind me. I saw the man in the middle of the street. I walked over to the phone and dialed 911. Before I called, I looked out the window. He was gone. I told my mom what happened when she got home. She didn't believe me. That night, I couldn't sleep. There was lightning outside, and I could see occasional shadows from the flashes through my window in my living room. I lay watching the flashes when I saw a strange outline. I looked closer and saw an outline of a man. I stood up and walked out of my room. I walked into the living room. It was completely dark outside. I stood in the doorway and waited. A car's headlight illuminated the pale, shallow face of Frank P. I ran into my room and locked the door. I never saw him after that night, but whenever I see that baby blue uniform, I think back to that night and that haunting image of a skeletal, unnatural face of Frank P.